A young mother had just given birth to a baby boy in a workhouse. After holding the baby for the first time, she asked the matron of the parish workhouse, Mrs. Corney, to look after the baby before she finally closed her eyes. The doctor said that the baby was weak and might die, but Mrs. Corney also doesn't know who the young woman is. She was found fallen in the street. After the doctor left, Mrs. Corney saw a gold pendant necklace on the woman's neck, then she took it. The baby boy was named Twist, Oliver Twist, by Mr. Bumble, the parish beadle. Oliver grew up to be a pale and thin boy. Many of the children in the workhouse were also thin and sick. They were always hungry. So one day, the boys decided to ask for more food and decided that Oliver would come forward to ask for food. After all the food was finished, they immediately saw Oliver. Oliver was scared, but he was also hungry. Finally, he walked to the master of the workhouse and asked for more food. The master of the workhouse got angry and called Mr. Bumble. He was a big fat man with a bad temper. He wore a tall hat and always carried a long thick stick. He held Oliver and beat him. After that, he shouted saying to lock Oliver in a dark room and would sell Oliver. When a sign was placed in front of the workhouse door, Oliver thought that if he stayed there, he would die. So he decided to escape to London through a small window. Oliver didn't bring anything. He could only ask people for food or endure his hunger. When he arrived at Barnet, a town near London, he stopped because he was tired and hungry. A strange-looking man was standing on the other side of the road. The man approached him and asked about Oliver's condition. Not long after he bought Oliver food, he introduced himself as the artful Dodger. Then he asked him to go with him to London. He said that he had an old friend who could give Oliver a place to sleep. When it was dark, they walked together on a narrow and dirty street. The street was dark and noisy that made Oliver scared. Suddenly, the Dodger stopped and opened a door. They went upstairs. After that, Dodger opened a door and pushed Oliver into it. The room he entered was dark. Only the flame of the fireplace was the source of light. Near the fireplace, he saw an old man and the boy sitting on an old sack. There was a rope hanging on the wall. Attached to the rope was a colorful silk handkerchief. The old man was named Fagin. After that, they ate together and then Fagin gave Oliver a strong hot drink. After drinking it, Oliver was very sleepy and fell asleep. He was moved onto an old sack. When Oliver woke up, he saw no one except Fagin, who was sitting at the table opening a silver box. In the box, there were rings, chains, and jewels. Fagin finds Oliver looking at him and asks while holding the knife, "You won't say anything to others, will you, my boy?" Oliver was told to clean up. After Dodger and Charlie came back, the four of them had breakfast together. Dodger gives 2 wallets to Fagin and Charlie gives 4 silk handkerchiefs to Fagin. Fagin says that they will teach Oliver to make handkerchiefs. Oliver agrees and the boys laugh. Now Fagin and the boys are playing a strange game. Fagin puts a lot of things in his pocket, then walks back and forth across the room, stops and looks around followed by 2 of the boys. Then, when Fagin isn't looking, they take all the things. Oliver thought the game was fun. In the afternoon, a young woman came in. Her name was Nancy. She had long hair and makeup on her face. She was wearing a light-colored dress. Fagin gives the Dodger the money. Then the Dodger, Charlie, and Nancy go outside. They are just going to have fun, says Fagin. After saying that, Fagin told Oliver to take the handkerchief in his pocket. Fagin praised Oliver after he managed to take it and said that Oliver would be as good as Dodger in the future. Dodger, Charlie, and the boys went out every morning, but Oliver had to stay behind to carefully cut the stitches on the silk handkerchiefs. It had been 3 days since the boys had come home without bringing anything, which made Fagin very angry. The next day, Fagin told Oliver to come with Dodger and Charlie to the city center. They entered a bookstore. There was an old man wearing a green robe and gold glasses. Suddenly, Dodger approached the man and took his handkerchief. Then, Dodger and Charlie immediately hid on the way out of the shop. When the old man felt his pocket, he realized his handkerchief was missing. He turned around and saw Oliver behind him and immediately shouted that Oliver had taken his handkerchief. Oliver, who was scared and shocked, ran out the shop with people chasing him. Unfortunately, he fell and was grabbed by people. He screamed that he wasn't the one who took it. The police came to take Oliver, but a man parted the crowd, saying he had actually seen what happened. He was the owner of the bookstore. Oliver was dropped to the ground. His face was getting paler. The old man with glasses shouted that Oliver was sick. Then he asked for a cab. He said he would take Oliver with him to Pentonville. Fagin waited for the boys to come home because they had been out for too long. After hearing footsteps, he knew only 2 people had come. He immediately attacked them with questions about where Oliver was while strangling Dodger. Dodger answered that Oliver was taken by the man they stole the handkerchief from. Hearing that, Fagin was very angry. He pushed the Dodger and hit Charlie. Just then, a young man came followed by Nancy. He was Bill Sykes, Fagin's friend, a big man in very dirty clothes. A cruel look in his eyes, he had a dog. Bill asked Fagin, then Fagin explains about Oliver. They are afraid that Oliver will tell about them to the man with glasses. They decided that Oliver should come back here. They told Nancy to go to Pentonville to look for Oliver, pretending to be looking for her missing brother. Oliver found himself in a peaceful and clean room, lying on a comfortable bed with fresh sheets and pillows. Confused, he whispered, "Where am I?" A kind-looking woman, the housekeeper, informed him that he was in Mr. Brownlow's house and that he had been very ill but was recovering. Soon, Mr. Brownlow, an elderly gentleman with gold spectacles, entered the room and inquired about Oliver's well-being. Oliver expressed his gratitude for being brought to the house and drifted off to sleep, feeling genuinely happy for the first time. In the library, Mr. Brownlow noticed a painting of a beautiful young girl whose resemblance to Oliver struck him as peculiar. Days passed, and Oliver regained his strength, receiving new clothes from Mr. Brownlow, who treated him with kindness and trust. One afternoon, Oliver offered to help Mr. Brownlow in return for his generosity. He eagerly volunteered to return some books to the bookstall and deliver money to the owner. Mr. Brownlow agreed, and Oliver set off with the books and a 5-pound banknote. As Oliver hurried through the streets, a young woman suddenly appeared before him. It was Nancy, who claimed to be his sister and insisted he return to their parents. Filled with fear, Oliver denied her claims, stating that he was an orphan living with Mr. Brownlow. Onlookers gathered as Nancy forcefully took hold of Oliver, and Bill Sykes, accompanied by his dog, joined them. Terrified, Oliver screamed for help, but Sykes accused him of theft, snatching the books from him. Sykes struck Oliver on the head while commanding his dog to guard him. With darkness descending, Sykes dragged Oliver back to Fagin's hideout, where the sinister Fagin greeted him with delight. Amid the chaos, Fagin and the other criminals noticed Oliver's new clothes and began to search his pockets. They discovered a 5-pound banknote, which Sykes claimed as his own. Distraught, Oliver pleaded for the return of the money and books, fearing that Mr. Brownlow would think he had stolen them. Fagin reveled in Oliver's distress, realizing that he was now considered a thief and a permanent member of their criminal group. Overwhelmed, Oliver tried to escape, but the boys prevented him, and Fagin prepared to strike him with a stick. However, Nancy intervened, snatching the snake and defending Oliver. She pleaded with Fagin not to harm the boy, despite her own involvement in capturing him. Bill Sykes mocked Nancy's conflicting actions and threatened both her and Oliver with his dog. Nancy, undeterred, expressed her willingness to endure any punishment as long as Oliver remained unharmed. Turning to Fagin, she accused him of corrupting her and making Oliver a thief. Ignoring Nancy's pleas, Fagin instructed Charlie to remove Oliver's new clothes and put him to bed. The frightened Oliver was locked in another room, where he cried himself to sleep. Meanwhile, Mr. Brownlow grew concerned as time passed and Oliver failed to return. Darkness enveloped the streets, but Oliver's whereabouts remained unknown. Oliver wakes up alone and anxious, waiting for Fagin's return. Fagin arrives with a text for Oliver and Nancy accompanies him, warning about the cruel Bill Sikes. Under Nancy's guidance, Oliver navigated the dark and crowded streets until they reached a house in Bethnal Green. Sikes showed Oliver a loaded gun and threatened him with dire consequences if he uttered a word while they were out. Nancy was instructed to stay behind with the dog while Sikes and Oliver prepared for an early morning endeavor. In the early hours, Sikes woke Oliver, urging him to eat quickly as they had a long journey ahead. They embarked on a tiring day-long walk, leaving London behind and arriving at Shepperton. Exhausted, Oliver fell asleep as soon as they reached an old house where Toby, a companion of Sikes, resided. They crossed a mist-covered bridge and walked through the quiet streets of Chertsey until they reached an old house surrounded by a high wall. Oliver realized the true purpose of their journey, a robbery. Frightened, he pleaded to be released and promised not to disclose anything. Sikes instructed Oliver to enter the house through a small window and open the front door for them. Toby broke the lock and Oliver began his treacherous mission, guided by Sikes' threat and the lantern he was given. Hours later, Oliver regained consciousness, injured and lying beside a road. Knowing he needed help to survive, he mustered the strength to walk towards the house they had targeted during the robbery. Knocking on a door, he collapsed, only to be discovered by two compassionate women. The older women recognized him as the boy involved with the robbers and expressed sympathy for his condition. The younger woman, Rose Maylie, agreed to care for him and called for a doctor. Oliver found solace in their presence, sharing his dreadful story with Rose. She assured him that he would be safe with them, far away from the wicked man who had caused him so much suffering. In the care of Rose Maylie and her companions, Oliver left behind his harrowing life in London, finding refuge and friendship in a place where he could finally experience kindness and compassion. After they left Oliver, Toby went back to Fagin's house. Toby told Fagin about the accident and Oliver was shot. Fagin got angry and immediately went to Sikes' house, but he didn't find him. There was only Nancy in that house. Fagin asked about Sikes and told her that Oliver was hurt. Fagin went back to his house, but before he got in, he met Monks. Fagin and Monks were talking about the robbery inside Fagin's house, and Monks wanted Oliver to be a thief. In the middle of their conversation, Monks saw a shadow outside the window. Fagin ran out to check it, but he found nothing. Fagin told Monks not to be worried and told him to go. Some weeks later, Oliver was sitting in his room in Maylie's house with the book in his hands. He was nearly asleep. He heard a noise and he saw two terrible faces looking through the window. The one was Fagin. Oliver blinked and they were gone. He thought that it was a dream.
Mr. Bumble was not the Parish Bela now. He was the new master of the workhouse. Otherwise, he was very unhappy because he had married to the matron of the workhouse, Mrs. Kearney. His wife was a hard, bad-tempered woman. Suddenly, Mr. Bumble hurried into the room. She looked at her husband who was half asleep in his chair. Mrs. Bumble asked whether he would sit here all day and it made Mr. Bumble annoyed. Before Mr. Bumble decided to leave, Mrs. Bumble knocked off his hat, then she began to hate and pull his hair. Mr. Bumble told her to get out. He started to go outside. He went to the inn and had a drink. There was a stranger who approached him. The stranger asked him some information about the boy who was born 12 years ago. He asked about the matron of the workhouse who was with the boy's mother when she died, and she was Mrs. Bumble. Mr. Bumble helped the stranger to meet his wife. The stranger's name was Monks. The next night, Mr. and Mrs. Bumble met Monks in the old building by the river. As soon as they arrived, Monks asked Mrs. Bumble about the gold tipped locket. It had 2 pieces of hair and a gold wedding ring. The name Agnes was written inside the ring. Monks drew the ring to the river below his window. Nancy faces the consequences of Bill Sykes' failed robbery and his subsequent illness. Despite Sykes' mistreatment, Nancy cares for him diligently. Fagin, Dodger, and Charlie arrive to help, providing food and money. However, Sykes demands more money and insists that Nancy, not Dodger, deliver it. Later, Monk's a mysterious character appears with news. He has a private conversation with Fagin, but Nancy overhears their conversation. She learns that Monk is Oliver's half-brother and wants to destroy his inheritance. Fagin gives Nancy the money for Sykes, and she returns to the house with fear, feeling exhausted and trapped. She decides to seek help for Rose Melly, revealing her remorse for betraying Oliver. Nancy discloses Monk's evil intentions and Oliver's precarious situation. Rose sympathizes and offers safety, but Nancy, feeling bound by her loyalty to her friends, declines. Despite the danger, she pledges to meet Rose on London Bridge every Saturday night. Oliver and Rose search for Mr. Brownlow in London. Oliver excitedly tells Rose he's seen Mr. Brownlow entering his house. Rose rushes to Mr. Brownlow, narrates Oliver's story, and expresses concern for his safety. Mr. Brownlow, revealed to see Oliver back, plans to confront Fagin and Monks. They decided to seek Nancy's help and arrange to meet her on London Bridge. Meanwhile, at Bill's house in Bethnal Green, Nancy, feeling desperate, tries to leave at night. Sykes locks the door, refusing to let her go. Fagin, sensing something amiss, decided to investigate. A week later on London Bridge, Nancy meets Mr. Brownlow and Rose, expressing fear. They move to a darker area and Nancy reveals information about Monks and Fagin's plans. Mr. Brownlow offers help, but Nancy, resigned to her fate, declines. She bids farewell, hinting at a somber future. Mr. Brownlow and Rose sadly leave, and Nancy, unaware of being followed, returns home. In the early morning, Fagin waits for Bill Sykes, who comes with stolen things. Fagin tells Sykes that Nancy talk about their secret crimes and they might get caught. Sykes gets mad and hurries home. Nancy knows everything wrong. Even though Nancy says she didn't tell, Sykes doesn't believe her. He hurts her a lot, making it very sad and scary. After hurting Nancy, Sykes cleans up. He washes, burns what he used, and tries to tidy the messy room. As the sun comes up, Sykes lives with his dog Bullseye, but he worries the dog might tell on him, so he decided to drown the dog. Bullseye, being smart, runs away, leaving Sykes alone to deal with what he's done. This part of the story is intense, showing how bad choices can lead to serious and sad consequences, making everything more complicated and heartbreaking. One day, Mr. Brownlow stops a carriage outside his house, and Monks is brought inside. Mr. Brownlow is serious and tells Monks he must tell the truth or face the police. In Mr. Brownlow's library, he reveals that Monks' real name isn't Monks, and his parents are dead. Monks denies having a brother, but Mr. Brownlow says he has a younger brother. Mr. Brownlow explains that Monk's dad was his friend, and the family had problems. Monk's parents separated and his dad fell in love with Agnes Fleming. They had a child, but Agnes and the child left the country. Monk's dad went abroad, got sick, and died. There was supposed to be money for Monks, his mom, Agnes, and her child, but Monks and his mom destroyed the will. Mr. Brownlow shows a picture of Agnes connecting Monks to Oliver. Mr. Brownlow says Monks tried to make Oliver a thief, and there's been a murder. Monks is scared. Mr. Brownlow insists Oliver deserve his dad's money and forces Monks to sign a paper. Agreeing to leave the country, Monks has no choice and agrees. This part of the story reveals family secrets and connects Monks and Oliver past. In an old house by the river, a robber named Toby saw Bill Sikes, a murderer, coming in with his dog Bullseye. Sikes looked scared. Bullseye was tired, so Toby gave him water and waited. There was a loud knock, and Toby opened the door. Sikes was pale and shaky. Bullseye howled. Sikes asked about Fagin, and Toby said the police got him. Sikes got more scared when he heard the Dodger had turned against them. Sikes, worried about Fagin being hanged, panicked. Toby didn't say much. Charlie Bates, their friends, come in and accuse Sikes for murder. Charlie shouted for help, and a crowd gathered outside. Toby tried to lock the house, but Charlie kept shouting. Sikes, feeling trapped, locked Charlie in a room upstairs, facing an angry crowd. Sikes tried to escape by climbing onto the roof. He planned to use a rope to get down. But as he met the rope, Sikes saw Nancy's eye, got scared, and fell off the roof. The rope tightened and Sikes died. Bull's eyes tried to follow him but fell and died too. Fagin, alone in prison, had a tough last day. He screamed and couldn't sleep. When the clock struck 8, he was hanged. The crowd cheered. Monks went to America and died in prison. Mr. Brownlow bought a house nearby. Oliver became Mr. Brownlow's son and lived happily.